On a physical level, we experience time as a series of disconnected flashes. It's a linear progression of moments that occur, vanish, and are replaced. This relentless forward motion makes it difficult to hold on to the present. Without context, the events happening around us lose their stability, leaving the mind unable to find a clear sense of meaning in the flow. The 4th century philosopher St. Augustine identified this psychological tension as distentio animi. He described it as the sensation of the mind being stretched and torn apart by the past we remember and the future we expect. Augustine's paradox highlights a specific failure of the human mind. We lack a natural way to translate the infinite, meaningless progression of physical time into a bounded, intelligible reality. In 1983, the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur proposed a structural response to this crisis in his work Time and Narrative. Ricoeur looked for the stability we need inside the logic of storytelling. He argued that narrative provides the necessary frame to keep the mind from being stretched to the breaking point. Paul Ricoeur found his foundational framework in an ancient source, Aristotle's Poetics. For centuries, scholars treated the Poetics as a handbook for playwrights, a collection of technical rules for writing tragedies to be performed on a physical stage. Ricoeur treats these rules as an operating system for human experience. In his reading, the Poetics becomes a tool for processing and synthesizing reality. The central component of this system is the Greek concept of Muthos, which we usually translate as plot. Ricoeur defines Muthos as emplotment, the active process of gathering and shaping raw data into a coherent whole. Understanding exactly how the mind performs this act requires us to completely set aside our reliance on chronological timelines. In a standard chronological model, history is a flat axis. Events happen one after another, creating a structure that relies entirely on simple sequence. Logic, rather than sequence, governs the progression of a plot. Ricoeur notes that the grand law of narrative relies on internal necessity to create meaning. Emplotment suppresses physical chronology. It breaks the flat timeline apart, turning a sequence of and then into a three-dimensional architecture of because of. Once separated from the timeline, these moments fall into 3 categories: human goals, physical causes, and random chance. In daily life, these 3 elements are disconnected. A person's ambition, a mechanical failure, and a stroke of luck exist in the world without any obvious relationship to one another. Without a way to bind them, these events remain formless. They generate noise, but they fail to produce an intelligible story. Ricoeur calls this first step the configurational act, grasping disparate elements into a unified shape. Connections are drawn based on causality, mapping how one event requires another, following Aristotle's rules of probability and necessity. Aristotle's concepts of beginning, middle, and end function as structural anchor points. A beginning initiates a logic, a middle carries the momentum, and an end closes the sequence. This system represents an action that is whole, complete, and of a certain magnitude. Magnitude refers to structural density. It measures how tightly events are bound to each other, whether the action spans a few hours or several decades. Muthos acts as a synthetic matrix. It takes isolated occurrences and converts them into a singular, tightly bound, intelligible action. This geometric model must survive a specific stress test, the messiness of real life. A perfect logical web must account for the unpredictable. Aristotle addressed this with peripeteia, or the sudden reversal of fortune. This reversal represents a massive shock to the system, a disruptive contingency threatening to break the logical web. But the plot achieves order by absorbing chaos, forcing the unexpected reversal to become a necessary, load-bearing component of the final structure. Ricoeur describes this dynamic as discordant concordance. The plot tames the chaos of lived experience while preserving the fundamental unpredictability of the original event. A successful emplotment takes a completely unpredictable accident and makes it feel logically inevitable in hindsight. This structure interacts directly with the data of our lives. It sits above the timeline, processing the flow of experience. Ricoeur calls the raw, unformed data we live through mimēsis 1. This is the level of practical human experience. Mimēsis 2 is the stage of configuration. Here, Muthos pulls data up from the chronological chaos, locking those moments into logical geometry. Analyzing a plot or a history means tracing this internal dynamics. observing how a new meaning emerges from the ruins of sequential time. Narrative offers a poetic resolution to the problem of time. It provides an architecture that makes the passing moments intelligible. This logic provides the structural foundation for both fictional literature and historical science. It is the framework we use to understand ourselves. Ricoeur concludes that time becomes human time when it is organized into a narrative. Without emplotment, we are trapped in the chaos of the present. With it, we become the architects of our own reality.